What are the top 10 systems you should be considering in 2020 and beyond? I'm going to talk about that in today's video when I provide our ranking of the top 10 ERP systems of 2020. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting Group. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients through their digital transformation and ERP journeys. And this is one of the most fun things I do as a consultant is put together this list of top 10 systems. Part of the reason it's so fun is because we're technology agnostic, we're completely independent, and we don't really care who's number one or number two or who doesn't make the list at all for that matter. Vendors do care, and we hear a lot of feedback, positive and negative, once we post this list. Of course, people that aren't at the top think they should be. People that are at the top are usually pretty happy. But our goal here today is to share with you, based on our team's collective experience and our own research, what are those top 10 systems you should be thinking about as you begin your digital transformation in 2020 and beyond. Before I get into the list, just a couple of things around how we got to this list. So last year we put out a top 5 ERP systems list, which focused just on the top 5. So one of the big changes we made this year is we wanted to be a little bit more comprehensive and look at the top 10. Now that we as a consulting organization have a lot more experience over the last year with a number of different systems, both in helping clients select and implement that technology, we wanted to include a more robust list of the entire top 10. The other thing we've done is we've changed our methodology a bit. One is, first of all, we've gotten more people involved in providing input in their assessments and ratings of these systems. And when I say more people involved, I mean more people from the Third Stage team who are all independent, technology agnostic. And so we've consolidated those results into this top 10. And the way we arrived on the top 10 and asked our consultants to rate the top 10 list is through a number of criteria. It's a pretty broad set of criteria. Everything from maturity, general functionality, total cost of ownership, scalability, flexibility, the adoption rate is a big one, something to think about as you're considering these different software vendors. And then also the degree of product innovation and the long-term roadmap for the vendor. Those are all things that are quantitative and qualitative criteria that we use to help determine where different vendors fit in the top 10. The last thing I'll mention before I jump into the list is that this is a top 10 list meant to be general across all different industries, different company sizes, different geographies. So certainly when you look at your own industry vertical, your geography, your company size and complexity, these top 10 lists may shuffle a bit or look a bit different depending on who you are as an organization, but hopefully this provides our broad view of what the top 10 systems are. So without any further delay, let's jump right in. So coming in at number 10 is a system that many of you may not have heard of, and many of you that have heard of it may not think of it as a traditional ERP system, and that is ServiceNow. ServiceNow is a relatively new entrant into the marketplace. They haven't been around as long as some of the more established players, but they are gaining a lot of traction and momentum in the marketplace, particularly around service-based organizations and service-based functions within organizations. So a lot of IT organizations, for example, large complex IT organizations or customer service centers will use ServiceNow as a way to track customer tickets and workflows related to those types of processes. So ServiceNow can be a great solution for those of you with larger or service-based organizations or service-based functions within your organization. Now, ServiceNow is not your traditional ERP system that starts with financials and then works out to other capabilities. ServiceNow's core capability is the service component, and it has other capabilities on top of that. So it really depends on what your priorities are as an organization. But based on the adoption rate, the level of innovation, its trajectory in the marketplace, and the general results we've seen with clients who have evaluated and implemented the product, ServiceNow lands in our top 10 at number 10. Coming in at number 9 is another solution that you may not traditionally think of as an ERP system, and that is Workday. Now, Workday has traditionally been an HCM, human capital management type of system, meant to help with the employee experience, automate HR processes and payroll and benefits and that sort of thing. But over the years, not only has Workday become a very fundamental competitor in the HCM space, in the cloud HCM space in particular, but they've started to work their way out to other ERP-esque type of functions like financials and other core capabilities that ERP systems typically provide. So while Workday probably isn't going to be a great solution if you're a complex manufacturer with a global supply chain and you're looking for something to do all of that stuff for you, but if you're a more simple vanilla organization that is placing a high priority on employee experience and you have pretty vanilla financial processes, Workday could be a great consideration for you. And it certainly is a up and coming type of system that we see a lot of positive growth and trajectory and results in the marketplace. And that's enough to land Workday at number 9 on our list. Coming in at number 8 is Infor M3 combined with Infor CloudSuite. The reason I call both of those out is because Infor is in a state of transition, like a lot of vendors are, moving from some legacy product to cloud-based newer products. And we're still seeing a number of organizations, particularly in the manufacturing and distribution space, implement Infor product, particularly M3 and CloudSuite. Now, CloudSuite, for a while, Infor seemed to be marketing CloudSuite as the end-all, be-all flagship solution. But from what we're seeing, there's more of a focus on HCM and some select point functionality in CloudSuite. And they're still focusing on more of the legacy product, like with M3, on the core ERP functionality. Now, I think that's changing. They seem to be migrating more towards CloudSuite. But to be totally candid, Infor's strategy doesn't seem very clear to me. And if it's not clear to me as a consultant in the space, it's probably not clear to a lot of people looking for new ERP systems. So that's probably the biggest downfall that I see with Infor, is that their strategy seems to be a bit kludgy in the last few years, not quite as clear of a product roadmap. Vendors and VARs that are out selling the product have different views of what the priorities are. And you always have to look at executive shakeups and executive changes in leadership. And Infor's CEO recently resigned, and they're moving into a different direction with their leadership team. So for those reasons, Infor is strong enough to make the top 10, but not quite strong enough to move up into the top 4 or 5. Certainly in terms of market share, Infor is higher up on the list in terms of just market share. I think they're number 4. But based on the lack of clarity around the roadmap and products out there that are better, in our opinion, than Infor, that's what keeps them out of the top 5, but still enough to land them at number 8 on our list of top 10 systems for 2020. So Salesforce. Most of you have heard of Salesforce CRM, Customer Relationship Management, and you may be wondering, how could Salesforce possibly be on our top 10 list of ERP systems? The reason why Salesforce is on our list is not only because it's a very strong and robust CRM system, but also because they've built this ecosystem of third-party applications that are meant to provide different functions that mimic or mirror what traditional ERP systems do. And there's also a number of third-party providers that are creating ERP functions and industry-focused solutions on the Salesforce platform. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of innovation coming from that, because we're not relying on one vendor to create all the innovation and the functionality that we need for a complete ERP system. Now, having said that, despite the fact that it is a very innovative platform, you have your Force.com platform with Financial Force and other ERP-esque types of systems out there. It provides a certain amount of flexibility, but can also create a certain amount of complexity. So you have to be careful and be the right type of organization for this to make the most sense to you. Chances are you need to have a fairly robust or a fairly sophisticated and mature IT capability internally to be able to support multiple systems within the Salesforce platform. But having said that, there's a lot of adoption in the marketplace, a lot of momentum, a lot of companies evaluating and moving to Salesforce as one of the leading in one of the first cloud pure SaaS ERP systems, and that's enough to land Salesforce at number 7 on our list. So number 6 on our list is SAP S/4HANA. Now, many of you are going to be concerned that SAP is not higher on the list. SAP leads in market share. It's the number 1 ERP vendor for market share. So you may be wondering, how could SAP possibly be down at number 6? SAP and S/4HANA was in our top 5 last year, but it has fallen out of the top 5 this year down to number 6, largely because of the change in methodology that I mentioned early in this video, but also because, quite frankly, there are concerns in the marketplace around the maturity and the prime time readiness of S/4HANA as a solution. We're simply seeing too many problems in the marketplace with companies migrating S/4HANA. We're seeing a lot of companies that are completely shying away from S/4HANA because of the gaps in capability. And we're also seeing a lot of companies that, for better or for worse, or right or wrong, they're completely ignoring or moving a different direction from SAP simply because SAP has mandated that by 2025, all of their legacy products or legacy customers need to be off of the legacy system onto the HANA platform. So that's leaving a bad taste in a lot of customers' mouths, and even people that aren't current SAP customers are looking at that as a negative and going in different directions. So I suspect that SAP will quickly be back in the top 5, maybe next year or in the near future with S/4HANA as it continues to mature and as they continue to invest more money in the product. And I certainly think that if you're a larger Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 organization, you're probably going to put S/4HANA a lot higher, and I would agree with that. But for general purposes across industries and company sizes, S/4HANA now is at number 6. The last thing I'll note here is that any time there's a shakeup, like I mentioned before with Infor, a shakeup in senior leadership, within weeks of Infor CEO resigning, the CEO of SAP was replaced and removed from his position as CEO. So that tells you that combined with all the restructuring and layoffs that SAP has had and missing their numbers, tells you that there's trouble in paradise and SAP is not quite as on solid footing as it may have been in years past. Having said that, I've been in this industry a long time. I've seen SAP stumble and they seem to recover every time. So I have no doubt, and I suspect they'll probably be back on track here in the near future. But either way, that's enough to land S/4HANA at number 6 on our top 10 list. Coming in at number 5 is Sage X3. This is a new entrant in our top 5. It's moved up from last year. The reason Sage has moved up and it's gaining momentum is because it's a manufacturing and supply chain specific solution. It's very strong in MRP, complex supply chains, procurement, warehouse management. A lot of functionality that, quite frankly, some of the newer flagship cloud solutions don't have. Sage X3 already has natively. The other thing that I like about Sage and that our team likes about Sage is, especially for the mid-market manufacturing organization, Sage provides a certain amount of simplicity and lack of complexity that you don't have to deal with is if you were implementing an Oracle or an SAP or a different ERP solution. Now, some things to be aware of and some downside risk, as there is with any of these solutions. There's always a downside risk. With Sage, there's questions about just the product roadmap, a question on kind of what is the long-term strategy for the roadmap, and so that's something to keep an eye on. The other thing is just the viability of the company in general. I don't think the company's in dire straits by any means, but they're not as big as some of the other vendors that we're used to hearing about, like Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, et cetera. So the question there becomes, how stable is Sage as a company? I personally think they're pretty stable, but it's something that's worth looking into. And a couple things worth noting as you look to the future of Sage and its potential fit with your organization. So for those reasons, Sage cracks our top 5 at number 5. Coming in at number 4, which is also a new entrant in the top 5, is another ERP system you may have never heard of unless you live in Europe. You've probably heard of them, but it's a company called IFS. ERP market provider. They're close to $1 billion in revenue. They're a decent-sized company, a lot of installs across the world, but still a lot of companies haven't heard of them. And it's really interesting because a lot of times we mention the name to people and they assume it's some kind of startup or some kind of fly-by-night software company. They've been around forever. The thing with them, though, is they're not real splashy with their marketing. They're not advertising at airports and sponsoring golf events that we all see and read about, but instead they're just focusing on their product, and they're also focusing on specific niches, which I really like. They're not trying to be everything to everyone. They're focusing on service-based organizations or field service-based organizations, industries like construction, utilities, oil and gas companies, some industrial manufacturing. Anything that has any sort of field service management component is a strength of theirs, and that's an area where they tend to outperform the functionality that's needed there. The other thing I like about the product and that our team likes about the product is that they're very focused on the customer experience. And when we think about digital transformation, in my opinion, it should be less about how do we make financials work better and more about how can we provide a better customer experience and become more of a data-driven organization. And IFS does that just by the nature of their product being very customer facing in the field service management side of things. So if you're an organization that's in construction or utilities or industrial manufacturing, anything with field crews and field techs, IFS is one of those products that you should be thinking about. Now the flip side, the thing to think about and the downside of IFS is they haven't built out a very robust implementation partner network. I know this is something they're working on. They're trying to remediate, but they don't have a ton of options to choose from when it comes to potential resellers or system integrators. Most of their implementations are still done through IFS Direct, so it kind of limits your options in finding technical and functional consultants that know the software really well. But having said that, I know they're moving in the right direction. The needle seems to be moving towards more of a partner network and building out a more robust partner network. But it is something that's a liability and something that's holding them back a bit, but it's still enough to land them at number 4 in our top 10 list. Coming in at number 3 on our list is Oracle ERP Cloud. This is a solution that many are surprised is new to the top 5 this year. Many would argue it should have been in the top 5 last year. Many did argue that it should have been in the top 5 last year. The thing that was holding it back last year was, quite frankly, the lack of adoption we were seeing in the marketplace and the lack of momentum in customer adoption in successful implementations, which is one of the things we look for, is what's the track record of adoption and successful implementations. And we're starting to see more evidence of that, and we're starting to see Oracle as a more flexible and a less complex alternative to S/4HANA. I'm not saying that every organization that is considering S/4HANA should go down the path of Oracle instead, but it is a very good, viable alternative. Now, having said that, some of the downside risk of Oracle ERP Cloud is still in the manufacturing space. That's an area where it just hasn't quite figured out how to address that market and how to provide that robust capability it used to have with EBS and some of the older products. Now, I think, having said that, Oracle Cloud is a bit further along in their cloud transition simply because they had the Fusion false start several years ago, and that gave them a head start on developing Oracle ERP Cloud. But having said that, there's still some things to think about and be aware of on the risk or the downside side of things. But having said all of that, that's enough to land Oracle ERP Cloud at number 3 in our top 10 list. And so as we get to our top 2 here, it's the same top 2 as last year, but we flipped them. So number 2 was last year's number 1, and number 1 is last year's number 2. Falling to number 2 this year from the number 1 spot is Microsoft D365. And the reason it's fallen is probably less of a function of D365 itself and more a function of what the new number 1 is doing better and improving upon over years past. Number 2 on a list like this with so many options to choose from is still a great place to be, still a very viable alternative to large organizations, mid-sized organizations, even smaller startups are considering D365. The maturity of the product is still a bit in question. There's still a lot of work to do on the roadmap to get D365 back to where AX and Great Plains and Navision were, the legacy Microsoft products. But they've done enough work and they've proven themselves at enough different organizations that we've seen, and we've seen enough successes to place Microsoft toward the top of the list. Now, the downside with D365 to be aware of is the partner ecosystem, the partner network. It's a complete mess. There's too many partners out there. There's too many implementation system integrators and resellers that shouldn't be doing what they do, but they are, and Microsoft doesn't have a lot of control over that, and they take a very hands-off approach to the implementation partner network. So that's something to be aware of. That's a big landmine if you're implementing D365. There's simply too many players out there that don't have the right competencies and the right skill set or certifications to be doing D365 implementations effectively, and that's part of the reason why D365 is now number 2 instead of number 1 on our list. But having said that, it's a great product. We see a lot of happy customers using the product. A lot of our clients are using it, and we're helping a lot of clients transition to D365 as we speak, so that's enough to land D365 at number 2 on our top 10 list. Coming in at number 1 on our list, it was last year's number 2, and that is Oracle NetSuite. Now, Oracle NetSuite is a product that 5 or 10 years ago I would not have thought would make the top of the list. It's a product that I had thought of as more of a small, maybe a mid-market type of ERP solution, but especially with the acquisition, Oracle's acquisition of NetSuite, I would put this more at the top of the list now simply because we're seeing more larger and upper mid-market organizations adopt NetSuite. So a bit of background around NetSuite, which helps put it in the #1 spot if you look back at its history, is that it's been a cloud SaaS solution since way before cloud and SaaS were cool to do. And so for that reason, their product is much more mature than some of the other newer entrants into the cloud and SaaS space. Even the more established ERP vendors like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, and some of them have not quite caught up to NetSuite simply because NetSuite has such a big head start on this. Now, the thing that was holding back NetSuite last year that kept them off the #1 spot was that the manufacturing and to a lesser degree some of the distribution functionality had not quite evolved as much as it needed to. It's still not a great solution if you're a complex manufacturer with make to order and complex project management or complex field services. But if you have fairly vanilla distribution and light manufacturing and sub-assemblies, it can still be a great fit for you. And if you're certainly in the financial services or retail, some other industries as well, NetSuite is a great product, and that's enough to put it at #1. The liabilities or the downside things to think about is A, you want to make sure that you're looking at NetSuite not only for what you are as an organization today, but if you're scaling for very high growth and you're a multinational company that's scaling to be multi-billion-dollar organization, you may outgrow the capability of NetSuite. The other thing to think about on the flip side is that the implementation partner network is still a bit suspect, much like Microsoft Dynamics is. Most implementations seem to still happen through NetSuite, at least the ones we've been involved with. The technical resources are largely coming from NetSuite. And NetSuite still has more of a call center model in their implementation support where you set up hour blocks of time to consult with your consultant to help you set up the system. And for a lot of our clients, they need more hands-on support than that, and we need more visibility and more breadth and robust resources. So those are some things to think about. The product itself is definitely there in many cases, but the support behind it is still developing. I think the fact that Oracle owns it now, we've seen a lot of increased momentum in adoption rates and being more aggressive going after different verticals. So for that reason, we put Oracle NetSuite at #1 on our top 10 list. So 2 things that didn't make the top 10 list, but maybe they should have. One is the whole concept of best of breed. A lot of times you may not want to pick just one system. You may end up picking multiple systems here. One could argue the best of breed should have been #1 on our list because there's so many organizations now looking at multiple systems to identify and fill different gaps. And you see that in our top 10 list. You see Salesforce on the CRM side, Workday on HCM, and ServiceNow on the services workflows. So a lot of functional best-of-breed type solutions with ERP capabilities, you can put those together to provide more complete solutions. So best-of-breed is one thing that you could argue should have been in the top 10. The other thing that did not make the top 10, but some may argue should make the top 10, is the do-nothing option, which is don't implement any sort of new ERP system. Stick with what you've got, get more value out of it, wait for some of these vendors to stabilize their product and let the products mature. So that's something to consider as well, is using what we've got today. Can we get more value out of it? Can we do a simpler upgrade or get more value out of our current systems? So I hope you found this helpful. I've included a link below that includes a link to the article about the top 10 that describes this in more detail. I've also included a link to our annual ERP report, which includes not only the top ERP systems, but a bunch of other best practices you should be thinking about as you evaluate potential options and go to implement new technology for your digital transformation in 2020 and beyond. I hope you found this helpful. If you did like this video, please like it. Please subscribe to my channel. I encourage you to share any comments you might have below in the comments field. I'd love to hear your feedback on this top 10 list and see what you think. Thanks very much for your time and have a great day.